collapse is leading to a new and dangerous language of threats. Iran is preparing for the next blow, quietly arming itself and preparing for war under the cover of ceasefire. It appears that the Revolutionary Guards ordered crews to dig through the ruins in order to recover the missiles that were buried after the strikes. Iran's top leadership is heading towards an unprecedented internal explosion. Is the Iranian Foreign Minister, Abbas Araghchi, about to be fired? The President of Iran and the Speaker of the Parliament are furious over his conduct. Trump issued a clear and firm statement regarding Iran's uranium. We will get it, one way or another. He said this yesterday, and also Trump was briefed last night on new operational plans for strikes against Iran. And in response, Iran threatened to use booby-trapped dolphins to attack the United States ships. The path to defeating Hezbollah in Lebanon is already known to Israel. And in the IDF, they are preparing to defeat the terrorist organization down to the last terrorist. Welcome to the new stage of this war, and it is called economic fury. I'm Yair Pinto, with me is Mati Shoshani, and we are boots on the ground bringing you the whole truth about what's happening in Israel and also the full truth about what's happening in our neighborhood, the Middle East. And this is the opening of day 62 of the war against the Revolutionary Guards in Iran. The maritime blockade imposed by the United States on Iran is beginning to create an effect deeper than regular sanctions. For almost 5 decades, the Iranian regime knew how to live under American pressure. It sold oil to China, operated a gray fleet of tankers, used secret cargo transfers in the Middle East, in the middle of the sea, and at the same time built a doctrine of deterrence around the Strait of Hormuz. But the current war and the American blockade are placing a much harder problem in front of Iran, no longer bypassing the sanctions, but physically blocking exports and exposing the shadow fleet. In fact, the blockade is exposing the Iranian method, weakening it, and even eliminating it at this point in time. The commander of CENTCOM and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff briefed the president with a similar briefing having been given 2 days before the beginning of the war in February. The purpose of the briefing is to break the deadlock in the negotiations or to deliver a final military blow. One of the options that apparently came up in the briefing is taking control of part of the Strait of Hormuz in order to open it for shipping, according to one of the sources. The additional options presented to President Trump included striking power stations and strategic facilities in Iran, which would mark an escalation in the campaign so far. It was also made clear to Trump that the blockade on Iran is creating difficulties for the Iranian oil industry and is succeeding in neutralizing the regime. At the same time, the deadline for receiving congressional approval to continue the war expires today, but the president may ignore it. As the days pass, Tehran is discovering that Trump did not really enter a ceasefire. The naval closure of the Strait of Hormuz is a hard and brutal war that threatens to finally choke the Iranian economy and bring it to total collapse within a short time. So what is happening with Iran? The total blockade by the American Navy is a critical hole in Tehran's war strategy, which is based on guerrilla tactics and control of the Strait of Hormuz, and is leading to collapse of the shadow ships network that export oil from Iran to China. The Iranian economy is crashing, with an exchange rate of 1.81 million reals to one United States dollar. Mass unemployment and a deep political split between the moderates who are demanding a deal and the extremists who are threatening military escalation, and also exposing dolphins. Exploding dolphins are being threatening to be used against the United States ships. Iran announced yesterday that it would respond with long and painful strikes against the American position if Washington renews the attacks and once again declared its ownership over the Strait of Hormuz. American officials said that Iran is using the ceasefire to recover ballistic missiles and ammunition that were hidden or buried underground after the strikes by the United States and Israel. Therefore, Tehran has increased its efforts and is trying to quickly rebuild its missile and drone array in case Donald Trump decides to renew the strikes. Ayatollah Khamenei published a statement today, Mujtaba, not Ayatollah, my bad, saying that the place of the Americans in the Gulf is at the bottom of the waters. It's important to understand that inside the regime of Revolutionary Guards in Iran right now, there is a massive conflict between several bodies. A report by Iran International reveals an unusual power struggle at the top of the Iranian regime. It appears that the president and the Speaker of Parliament are against the foreign minister, with the Revolutionary Guards in the background, and all of it because of the different positions regarding the nuclear talks. United States President Donald Trump said about Iran's enriched uranium, "We want to get the nuclear material. It is very deep underground. You need diggers and all kinds of equipment to reach it, but we want to get it. We will get it one way or another. Either we will get it or we will take it. Either they will give it to us or we will take it from them. And we will also bring you the digital blockade that is choking Iran." While senior officials in the Ayatollah regime envoy enjoy free access to the internet with white SIM cards, the citizens are losing their livelihoods. The internet blockade, which is sparking public anger, has led to a wave of layoffs in the high-tech sector and has set advertising and computer professionals to sell goods at street stands. In Tehran, they warned the shutdown threatens the destruction of the country's infrastructure by the decision makers. The United Arab Emirates no longer trusts Iran. Welcome to the new era of the UAE after its withdrawal from the oil cartel. It turns out now that against the background of its withdrawal from the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, an advisor to the president of the Emiratis made it clear that freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz depends on the international community and not on Iranian arrangements. His remarks were made as Abu Dhabi is seeking to free itself from oil quotas in favor of economic recovery from the war and a deepening of the strategic alliance with the United States and with Israel. Why with Israel? Because it now turns out that Israeli forces operated on Emirati soil during the war with Iran. The British newspaper Financial Times reported that Israel transferred advanced weapon systems to the United Arab Emirates, led by the laser-based air defensive system Iron Beam. This is in order to help it defend itself against an Iranian missile and drone attack. And today, we will bring you the startups that will take down Hezbollah's explosive drones. Hezbollah, the terrorist organization in Lebanon, has launched that cost only a few $100s on AliExpress, and they are resistant to jamming. These are drones that they buy very cheap. They're called fiber optic drones. And in Hezbollah's hands, they have become a real threat against the IDF soldiers. While Oreitan, the laser beam, is delayed in reaching full deployment all around Israel, a series of Israeli startups is trying to provide a tactical answer to the threat that is slipping past the big defensive companies. We will bring you all the information very soon. I'm Yair Pinto, with me is Mati Shoshani, and we are boots on the ground, bringing you the full truth about what's happening in Israel. And this is day 62 of the war against the Revolutionary Guards in Iran, which is the head of the crumbling axis of evil in the Middle East. And 1 second before we begin, I want to call on you to continue spreading the truth. Share our content with as many people as possible. click on the subscribe button. And most importantly, don't forget to look for me, Yair Pinto, and for Mati Shoshani on our social media platforms to get the behind-the-scenes look of what it's like to live in Israel during this war. Our senior Middle East Affairs correspondent, Mati Shoshani, is the American maritime blockade a success? Is it working? I mean, what are we seeing on the ground?
Shalom, Yair. I'm coming to you today once again from the Galilee, as you can see behind me, for those of you who are
Nice
wondering.
view.
And here the blockade has not yet reached. But to answer your question about what's actually happening in Iran, I mean, the answer is a complicated yes. Yes, the blockade on Iran is working in the sense that it's causing a lot of financial damage to the Iranians. Is the blockade working in the way that pop culture wants it to work, which is to almost immediately force the Iranians back to the negotiation table? Clearly not. It's been several weeks of it. Is it working in bringing down the Iranian regime? No, because that was never its intended goal. So what is the point of the blockade? The point of the blockade is to reverse on the Iranians what they were trying to do to other countries in the world, which is to cause substantial financial damage, vis-a-vis that financial pressure and political pressure on different countries, specifically, primarily, the United States and the Trump White House. And the hope was that the Gulf states that are terribly suffering from the blockade would pressure President Trump to stop the war. Clearly, that has not worked. Clearly, the Iranians have miscalculated their steps in this conflict, and clearly, the financial pressure on them is working. How do we know it's working? Because they're sweating, Yael. We're seeing them taking some extreme actions and trying to circumvent the sanctions and bringing in supply routes from different countries around them, and once again trying to bring ships in or out through the American blockade, only to be stopped repeatedly by them. And I think it's most evident in the immense pressure that the Iranian regime is placing on their proxies, primarily Hezbollah. When they use Hezbollah, when they play that button of using proxy warfare, that shows you that they're running out of options. So in that sense, I would say it is working. And I think there's one more hint that we can really follow. Anytime you see a headline where an Iranian official says something positive about the negotiations, says something positive about the talks with the US, it's showing that they are under pressure. Because most of the time, in most cases, well, what do? They claim that nothing is working. They claim that nothing is progressing with the United States. They claim there are no agreements, and their right to nuclear materials is, of course, an inherent right. But when they show you, and when they say, and they've been saying this often lately, that they're coming close to agreement with the United States, that they have a lot that's in common, that we're coming close to an end to the war, or a nearing of the end of the conflict and a resolution of the negotiations, that shows you that we are moving in the right direction and the financial pressure is working. I'm going to end on one number for the US, one number for Iran. The Iranians are losing close to $500 million per day because of the blockade on them. $500 million per day. That is money they need for weapons. That is money they need for the IRGC, money they need to export terrorism, pay all the salaries to all the terrorists that they have around the world. But guess who's making money instead? The United States. You already know this, Yael. The United States is making money while the Iranians are losing money. That is the important thing to know about the efficacy of this blockade.
Yeah, definitely, Mati. And there is another struggle that is taking place internally in Iran. We see that there is two camps that are facing each other. One is like conservative camp, the extremist camp, and one is the more moderate. I wouldn't call them even moderate camp, but there is a fight between the president and then the speaker of the parliament against the foreign minister. Can you explain what's going on and what are they fighting about?
Yeah, I want to say two things about this, Yair. There's the public side of this conflict, and then there's the assumption of what's actually happening behind the scenes. And I'll explain that statement. What we know publicly is that the Iranians are pretending or presenting to the world a situation or a scenario in which there's a conflict between different factions in the government, the so-called liberal factions in the government, and the non-liberal or conservative factions within the Iranian government. That's what they're presenting to the world. The latest conflict is between the foreign minister and the IRGC, or the supreme leader. Last week, it was a speaker of the parliament, Galibaf, or Galibaf, depends how you pronounce the sound, that he was in conflict and he resigned publicly because of that. That's the public-facing piece of information. But I want to say there's something more substantial here. The Iranians often in the past have used these type of conflicts or perceived conflicts as a tool to extend negotiations. And let me give you an example of what that looks like. If there's one voice that comes out of Iran, and that voice speaks clearly and says, we will do this, and we refuse to do that. So now the negotiation moves clearly in one direction or the next direction. But what if they create a scenario in which there are 4 voices or 5 voices that each one of them is pulling in a different direction? Now you as the West who's needing to negotiate with these people, to be able to move forward with the negotiation, what do you have to do, Yael? You have to be negotiating with different sides. You have to be talking to different sides, and that takes time, and that plays in the benefit of the Iranians. So it is very possible, I'm saying this because they've done this repeatedly in the past, that there is no problem in the Iranian government, that they're using this pretense of we're having conflict internally and there's a political issue here. They're using that as a tool to extend the negotiation, because once again, their goal was and always is to draw out time to survive. And if they're able to do that by pretending that someone resigned and is reappointed in the government, that's great. And if they're able to do it by having someone claim that there's conflict within the government, even better. If they can do all of that together and pretend like there are rogue factions in the government who are not listening to the supreme leader, that too buys them time. So is it the case here, or is it a combination of both? I'm not sure, and I'm not sure we're actually ever going to know. But I'll tell you that usually and often with the Iranians, things are more complex than appears on surface. They are masters of negotiation and have been for decades at this point. Really, we can't really take anything they say at face value. They're just brilliant in drawing out time. And remember, above everything we talk about, there's a cloud above every statement, above every PR release, above everything they say. And that cloud is they want to deceive. They want to draw out time. They want to survive to be able to fight another day. Everything they do, everything they say, everything they present to the world is through that prism. They don't care about what the truth is. They don't care about what the West wants. They want to draw out time, and they want to survive. And if they need to lie, to deceive, to blow up ships in the Strait of Hormuz, to have members of their government resign or be appointed or resign again, that all plays into their grand scheme. And it is never beyond their level of sophistication to fire, hire, and present conflict to be able to promote their agenda. Now remember this, the Iranian regime wants to survive, and as long as the negotiation continues and they don't publicly admit defeat, that plays to their benefit. Anything that goes against that harms the Iranian Ayatollah regime. Always remember that when we're dealing with the Iranians, they have the reputation, and they've worked hard to earn it, of master negotiators. They fooled the Obama administration. They fooled countless Western countries time and time again. They've always able to outweight, to out-negotiate, to outmaneuver. And in the end, in the past, the scenario has always been the same: more enriched uranium, less supervision on the Iranians. It seems that finally the Trump administration has understood how to negotiate with them and isn't willing to play their game. Will that work in the long term or not? Well, that's up to the future to decide.
No, exactly, Mati. And let's talk about the uranium, because Trump just stated that either they will give it to us or we will take it. And we both know what we will take it means. So what do you think will happen? Do you think that there will be another military operation to claim the uranium, or another solution to this problem?
I hate to admit it, Yael, but with President Trump, sometimes you don't know. He is sometimes he is such an unexpected and unknown and spontaneous leader that sometimes you think things are just set as a threat, and then he follows up on them. Here's what we do know as a fact: the U.S. has drawn up plans to extract the enriched uranium using special forces. How do we know this? Because there have been leaked conversations from within CENTCOM related to both Minister of Defense or War, depending who you ask, Pete Hegseth, and others in the regime, that claimed that there were people within the American military operations that said that the idea of using special forces to extract enriched uranium was too high risk, which shows you the conversation was taking place. Also, in recent days, President Putin of Russia has publicly said that ground operations in Iran by American special forces would be something very risky and unwelcomed by the international community, and of course, including the Russians. Then again, going along Russian advice, President Trump could just do what Russia's doing inside the Ukraine, which is a special limited military operation and not a war, which is what it is. That's depending on who you actually ask. So is Trump using this as a tool of negotiation, or does he actually mean to engage militarily? I think it's a little of both. I think he's willing to do things that most leaders have refused to do in the past, have shied away from doing in the past. He's shown that he's willing to take very, very brave steps. But at the same time, that willingness to do things is what makes him such a ferocious negotiator. Because if you're negotiating someone like that, who's willing to do almost anything to promote his agenda and protect his forces, his country, his goals in this negotiation, that incentivizes you, the Iranians, to cooperate at a much higher degree than if you thought he wasn't willing to do those actions. So what's actually going to happen? I don't think it's very likely that special forces will extract enriched uranium. I think it's much more likely that the Iranians will extract part of it willingly and hold on to other levels of enriched uranium as part of a larger, broader agreement. That's what I think is most likely.
Well, we'll have to wait and see, as always, with President Trump. Thank you very much, Mati. Hope you enjoy your weekend in the Sea of Galilee.
Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you to all of you that are joining us now. And I call on you to help us spread the truth. We are TBN Israel. The best way that you can do this is to share this content with as many people as possible. You can also click on the subscribe button. You can look for Yair Pinto and Mati Shoshani on our social media platforms. And you can go to our website, tbnisrael.com, and subscribe to our newsletter. And if you love TBN Israel and want to be part of what God is doing here in the land, we want to invite you to visit our official online store. You can go to shop.tbnisrael.com. Again, that's shop.tbnisrael.com. There, you can find TBN Israel merchandise that helps you stay connected to what's happening here on the ground and be part of sharing the message coming out of Israel. And right now, we also have the Boots on the Ground complete set available. And if you like to get the whole bundle, you can save $9 by using the coupon code BOTG-SET, Boots on the Ground SET, at the checkout, which brings the price down to 99%. So when you purchase from the store, you're also helping support the work that we are doing here on the ground, reporting, teaching, sharing what's happening in Israel from a biblical perspective. So if you're looking for something meaningful or just a simple way to stand with Israel, we invite you to check it out. Go to shop.tbnisrael.com. Thank you so much for standing with us. Now let's get back to the news, because Iran's missiles are not only sitting on launchers right now. Some of them, according to the American estimates, are being dug out of the rubbles, from bunkers underneath the ground, from stored sites that were hit, and from locations that were destroyed in previous strikes. Under the cover of the ceasefire, the Revolutionary Guards are trying to recover launchers, ammunitions, and drones, while President Trump receives a new military briefing on the possibility of renewed strikes. So is this still a ceasefire, or is this silence actually is a call for the next round? I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report for the ending of day 62 of the Roaring Lion War, or by its American name, Epic Fury. And today begins in Iran, not with declarations, not with a press conference, but in the ground itself. Because when the regime is digging through the rubble to save missiles, it means one thing. It is not preparing for peace. It is preparing for the next strike. The United States believes that Tehran has used the days of the ceasefire to quickly rebuild its missile and drone capabilities. Some of the missiles were hidden in advance. Some were buried under the bombardments. Now, the regime is trying to return them to service, scatter them again, and be ready for the moment that Trump decides that another wave of strikes will continue, or the economic chokehold will be too much for them to handle. And that's exactly what makes this day so dangerous. At the same time that the Iranians are digging, the commander of the United States Central Command, Admiral Brad Cooper, and the chairman of the Joint Chief of Staffs, General Dan Kane, briefed President Trump for about 45 minutes on new operational plans against Iran. A similar briefing was reportedly given to him 2 days before the war began in February. So Washington understands very well this is not a table exercise. This is a briefing that prepares a decision. Several options are on the table. A short and powerful wave of strikes against infrastructure targets inside Iran. A move to seize part of the Strait of Hormuz in order to reopen it for commercial shippings. And another option discussed in the past, a special operation around Iran's enriched uranium stockpiles. Trump does not have the full trigger yet. He doesn't want to pull it. But the American military system is already placing the loaded option on the table. And at the same time, there is also a political clock. In the United States, the 60-day deadline under the war and the powers resolution was expired. That law limits the president's ability to continue military action without congressional approval. The administration argues that the ceasefire stopped the clock, or at least changed its meaning. But the argument itself shows that Trump is now facing two pressures: military pressure against Iran and political pressure at home. And this is exactly where the naval blockade becomes the central tool of this war. The American blockade on the Iranian ports no longer looks like another sanction. This is not just a signature on a document in Washington. This is a military economic operation at sea. Ships are stopped, tankers are turned around, export routes are blocked. Iran's shadow fleet, that gray network of tankers that allowed Tehran to sell oil to China under the radar for years, is now being exposed and squeezed. For almost 5 decades, Iran learned how to live under sanctions. It turned off the transporters. It changed the flags. It transferred cargo from ship to ship in the middle of the sea. It sold oil to China at major discounts. It built an entire system of bypassing deception, mediation, and smuggling. But against an American naval line with warships, maritime intelligence, and constant monitoring, that system works far less effectively. According to reports, at least 44 vessels working for Iran were never to turn around or return to port. Some tankers were chased as far as the Indian Ocean. Some were ordered to reverse their course. Some are waiting. And Iran, which was used to playing in the shadows, is now discovering that shadows shrink when the United States Navy turns on the light. The numbers matter because they explain the fear in Tehran. Oil is the oxygen of the regime. It is the money behind the Revolutionary Guards. It feeds Hezbollah, it feeds Hamas, the militias in Iraq, and the Houthis in Yemen. When the oil does not go out, the money does not come in. And when the money does not come in, the entire axis begins to feel the choke. But Iran's problem is not only that it cannot sell oil. The problem is it has nowhere to put the oil that it continues to produce. Oil wells cannot simply be turned off like a kitchen faucet. If they are shut down quickly and under pressure, the pressure inside the reservoirs can change. Water can enter the oil layers. Pipelines can clog. The returning to full production can take years and cost billions. That's why Trump understands that this blockade can sometimes be more effective than bombs. He does not have to hit every facility. He only has to close the way out. If Iran begins drowning in its own oil, it is not only weakened economy, it is weakened strategically. And here comes the big question: who blinks first? Trump is betting that the Iranian regime will break before the global market breaks from energy prices. Iran is betting that Trump will break first because of fuel prices, political pressure, elections, and markets. and the American fear of a war that lasts too long. This is a game of time. But in the Middle East, games of time tend to turn very quickly into games of fire. Oil prices are already climbing to levels that worry the entire world. The head of the International Energy Agency warned that the world is facing one of the biggest energy crises in history. When a barrel of oil trades for $120, this is no longer only an Iranian problem. It becomes a problem for gas stations, industry, electricity, food, transportation, and every family in the world that feels the price at the end of the month. And that's exactly what Tehran wants, to turn this pain into global pain. But inside Iran, the pain is also deepening. The real, the currency, has collapsed to extreme levels. More than 1 billion citizens have lost their jobs. Food prices are rising. Factories have been hit. Small businesses are closing. And the digital blockade imposed by the regime on the internet has become another blow against the citizens already living under pressure. Senior regime figures use so-called white SIM cards, which give them broader access to the internet. The citizens, on the other hand, are cut off. Advertising workers lost income. Content creators collapsed. Software developers lost remote jobs. Small business owners who depend on Instagram, WhatsApp, YouTube lost their storefront to the world. Some of them have already moved to selling products on the streets. This is not only censorship, this is breaking of livelihoods. And when the Iranian citizens see that the official is connected to the internet while he himself cannot work, the anger is no longer only directed at America or Israel. It begins to turn inward, towards the regime itself, towards the Revolutionary Guards, towards those who speak about resistance while the people pay the bill. That's why the economic crisis is also becoming a regime crisis. Inside Iran's leadership, an unusual power struggle is developing around Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. According to reports, Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian and Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf are furious with his conduct, because the central claim is that Araghchi has been acting in recent weeks in coordination with senior Revolutionary Guards figures, without updating the president and without managing a clear government foreign policy. This is not a small argument over the wording of a statement. This is a struggle over who actually runs Iran during wartime: the president, the parliament, the foreign minister, or the Revolutionary Guards. When a foreign minister acts more like an envoy of a military apparatus and less like a minister in a government, this is not only a personal problem, it is a sign that the state itself is splitting between weak civilian institutions and a military force that holds the real keys. And in today's Iran, whoever controls the missiles, the internet, repression, and the last remaining money also controls the politics. That is why the nuclear issue is coming back to the center. Trump said sharply that he wants to obtain Iran's nuclear material. According to him, the material is buried deep underground, and it requires diggers and equipment to reach it. But he added, he will get it one way or another. Either they will give it to us, or we will take it. That is a sentence that Iran cannot ignore, because for Tehran, the nuclear file is not just another item in negotiations. It is the regime's life insurance. For Trump, that same nuclear material is exactly why Iran cannot be allowed to reopen Hormuz, breathe economically, and then drag out the talks for weeks or months. And that's the heart of the Iranian trap. Open the sea, talk about nuclear programs later on. Lift the blockade first, discuss uranium later. Give the regime oxygen first, then check whether it is willing to give up the very thing that brought the region to this war. Trump understands this. Israel understands this. That is why the blockade remains. And before we continue, if you understand how important it is to bring the full picture from the ground here in Israel to you, not just the headlines, but what's happening, help us spread the truth. Like this report, share it with your friends, with your family, and with anybody who think should know the truth of what's happening here. The best thing that you can do is to hit the subscribe button on TBN Israel on YouTube and never miss another update of Boots on the Ground. Look for us on our social media platforms and pray for the situation, because life in Israel is changing because of this war. And while Iran is being choked at the sea, the United Arab Emirates is making a move that shakes the energy market. Abu Dhabi announced its withdrawal from OPEC and OPEC Plus. This is not only an economic decision, it is a declaration of geopolitical independence. For decades, OPEC allowed oil-producing countries to control quantities, influence prices, and preserve political power through energy. How the Emiratis are saying, our national interests come first. We are not willing to remain tied to quotas that also serve Iran, Russia, and interests that are not ours. The timing is not accidental. Iran attacked the region, disrupted Hormuz, raised the energy prices, and harmed Gulf states as well. Abu Dhabi understands that Iranian unilateral arrangements cannot be trusted. An advisor to the Emirati president made it clear that freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz depends on the international community and international law, not on Tehran's promises. And this connects to another important exposure. Israel transferred advanced defensive systems to the United Arab Emirates, including detection and interception systems to help confront the Iranian missiles and the drone attacks. And according to reports, Israel also provided real-time intelligence on launches from Western Iran, and Israeli military personnel helped operate the systems. This is a new picture of the Middle East. Iran attacks, Gulf states understand the threat. Israel assists, the United States leads, and the Emiratis choose to deepen their alliance with those who actually protect them, not with those who threaten Hormuz. Here it must be said simply, Iran thought that it could frighten the Gulf. In practice, it is pushing parts of the Gulf states deeper towards Israel and towards the United States. And this is not happening only in energy. It is happening in security as well. Systems like Iron Dome, laser capabilities, drone detection systems, and other Israeli technologies are now gaining regional importance, because the Iranian threat is no longer only a large ballistic missile. It is also drone swarms, small drones, cruise missiles, explosive boats, and possibly attacks on undersea communication infrastructures. Iran is already threatening extreme options like mines, submarines, undersea internet cables, and even strange threats about explosive dolphins. It almost sounds unserious until you understand the Iranian method. You do not always need to win in a direct battle. Sometimes it's enough to scare the insurance companies, raise the prices, disrupt the shipping routes, and make the world fear the next move. And that's exactly what the Americans are now trying to prevent through a new international coalition around Hormuz. The goal is not only to escort the ships, the goal is to tell Iran, an international shipping lane does not belong to the Revolutionary Guards. You do not decide who passes, who pays, and who's afraid. But while the sea has become a central battlefield, Lebanon continues to burn. Hezbollah is placing before the IDF a new old threat: explosive drones connected to fiber optic cables. These are small and relatively cheap drones whose basic components can be bought on civilian websites, but on the battlefield, they become a lethal tool. The fiber optic cable connects the drone to the operator and allows control without relying on regular radio transmission. That is why electronic warfare systems, which work well against wireless drones, struggle against these tools. In southern Lebanon, these drones have already become the real threat to the IDF forces. They carry explosives, fly low and fast, and are difficult to detect in time. Some carry several kilograms of explosive devices and are operated by terrorists who receive a live video picture from the camera. Against a threat like this, every second matters. The solutions are still developing. There are smart sights mounted on assault rifles that help a soldier hit a drone at a short range. There are electro-optic, acoustic, and also small radar detection systems. There are drones that intercept other drones using nets or physical impacts. There are also laser systems, but their wide deployment is still limited, and they are not positioned at every IDF location in southern Lebanon. This teaches us about the deep change in the battlefield. Once we spoke about large missiles, launchers, tunnels, and tanks. Now a drone that costs a few $100s can hit an armored vehicle, disrupt movement, delay the evacuation, or threaten a force in the field. This is a war in which a cheap threat can force an expensive army to think faster, move flexibly, and be more attentive to the threats. And at the same time, the IDF continues to operate against Hezbollah infrastructure in southern Lebanon. Weapons depots, command centers, launchers, combat shafts, and terror infrastructure inside civilian areas, all of these are part of the same method. Hezbollah is not building only a firing capability. It is building an entire combat space inside villages, inside homes, inside ambulances, civilian institutions, and buildings designed to make it harder for Israel to respond. And here we need to understand the connection between Lebanon and Iran. The drone in Lebanon, the tunnel near the border, the launcher inside a civilian home, and the blockade in Hormuz. They are all part of the same system. Iran built a ring of fire around Israel, and now that ring itself is being choked. Its arms are trying to see where they can apply pressure in return. In the Palestinian arena as well, the sea is returning to the picture. The IDF took control of more than 20 vessels that participated in the flotilla in Gaza, with about 175 activists on board who are now making their way to Israel. The Foreign Ministry described the flotilla as a provocation and stressed that anyone who wants to transfer aid to Gaza can do so through the recognized routes, through Ashdod port and security inspections. From Israel's perspective, an attempt to break the naval blockade is not aid. It is an attempt to create pictures, confrontations, and headlines. And that's part of the same day. Israel enforces a naval blockade around Gaza. The United States enforces a naval blockade against Iran. Hormuz, Gaza, the Gulf, the Mediterranean. The sea has become a battlefield of decision. Even outside of the Middle East, this campaign is being felt. In Australia, the Commission of Inquiry into the anti-Semitic shooting attack at the Bondi Beach, where 15 people were murdered, recommended a comprehensive reform of counter-terrorism units and stronger security at Jewish events. This matters because this war does not remain only in Iran, in Lebanon, or in Gaza. It affects Jewish communities around the world. Their sense of security and the question of whether Western countries understand that the anti-Semitic threat is not a local incident, but part of a much wider climate. And at the same time, the United Nations said that at least 21 people have been executed in Iran since the beginning of the war with the United States and Israel, and more than 4,620 have been arrested on charges related to national security. This is another side to the same war. While the regime blames the world, it also tightens its grip on its own citizens. Executions, arrests, internet shutdowns, suppression against protests, against anybody who opposes this regime. This is not only a war against an external enemy, this is the regime's war against the Iranian society. And Trump, meanwhile, is opening a verbal front with Europe as well. After German Chancellor Friedrich Merz criticized America's handling of Iran, Trump attacked him again, saying that he should spend more time ending the Russia-Ukraine war and fixing his own broken country, and less time interfering with those who are getting rid of the Iranian nuclear threat. Beyond the sharp style, there is a strategic message here. Trump is telling Europe, do not stand on the sidelines, do not lecture, and do not expect America to pay the price for stopping Iran alone. And this exposes the gap inside the West. Europe feels the energy prices. The United States wants a decision. Israel wants to make sure that the nuclear threat does not remain alive underground. And Iran wants one thing: time. Time to dig out the missiles, time to rebuild the launchers, time to move ammunition, time to reopen Hormuz, time to remove the blockade, time to deepen the split between Washington and Europe, and time to make the world grow tired. But Day 62 shows that time is also a weapon against Iran. Every day, the oil does not leave, the regime suffocates. Every day the internet is shut down, the citizens grow angrier. Every day missiles are dug out from the rubble, Trump receives another reason not to trust Iran. And every day Hezbollah operates drones in Lebanon, Israel receives another proof that the Iranian axis has not stopped. It has only changed its shape. This war is no longer measured only by the number of missiles that are launched or the number of targets that are struck. It is measured by the question of who will lose room to maneuver first. Iran under the blockade, Trump under political pressure, Hezbollah under strikes in southern Lebanon, or the world under the energy crisis. And if everyone is already standing on the edge of the same rope, will the next explosion come from the sea, from the uranium, from the next drone in Lebanon, or from one decision inside the Oval Office? So keep spreading the truth. Follow us. Most importantly, don't forget to hit the subscribe button here on YouTube so you never miss another update of Boots on the Ground. I'm Yair Pinto. With me is Mati Shoshani. Make sure to look for us on social media platforms. And the best thing that you can do, especially now when we enter the weekend, is to unite in prayer for the peace of Jerusalem. Pray for the soldiers. Pray for wisdom to our leaders. Pray for the Iranian people. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Pray for God's will to be done here on earth. And we'll see you again tomorrow. Shabbat Shalom from Jerusalem. Shalom, Yerushalayim.